Hey everybody, I'm going to give you some guidance today on academic poster creation and some design tips. I've divided these up into a number of videos, so hopefully you're going to get some good tips along the way. So first things first, what is an academic poster? Well, typically a researcher or academic will use an academic poster to present their research in a conference or an exhibition or something like that. It's very stereotypical. It will be a printed poster and it will be on the wall or on a board or something like that. The researcher themselves will be next to their poster and they will be doing things like presenting it very briefly, or they'll be answering questions about it. So posters, think of them this way. They are some of the information. They are not all of the information. So posters are really good for overviews of information, but they don't present absolutely everything about the particular topic or thing or research. Like I say, these are normally one piece of research or one study. So when you look for examples of academic posters online, you're going to find loads of them structured kind of like a scientific report would be. So introduction, method, results, some kind of discussion or conclusion. Now, the difficulty is when you're a student, you're often not asked to present information about one particular piece of research, but you might be asked to cover an entire theory or a full research area. So you could include like 10 different pieces of research in there, or maybe you're asked to give like an A versus B discussion or argument in the form of a poster. This takes more than the sections of introduction, method, results. So it can be a bit confusing, and unfortunately, it can lead to really crap poster design. So let's try and get over that now. Let's try and improve your poster design. Like I say, I'm focusing on students, but if you're a professional academic, you might pick up some tips here. First and foremost, ask yourself the question, why? Why are you creating this academic poster? Now, if you're a student, luckily, this is pretty clearly defined normally. And you'll also have something called an assignment brief or some kind of documentation to guide you. It'll ask you what the question actually is, and that'll be the topic normally. So let's say memory as an example. So because I come from a psychology background, I often mark those types of papers. But aside from that, it will also give you things like learning outcomes. Now, learning outcomes are fundamental for any really good piece of work. In this case, if we're going to produce a really good academic poster, we need to make sure all the learning outcomes are addressed. The learning outcomes are a way for us to demonstrate we have learned something, we have developed because of a module in this case. If you're a professional, consider to yourself, why am I creating this? What's the purpose of me making this poster? If it's for me to present information or about my research, good, but ask yourself more questions than that. How am I going to present that information? What are the most important parts? And those questions, as well as the learning outcomes, are ways which we can begin to organize our poster and plan things out. So point number one, ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is the point of this poster? If you've got more clarity through learning outcomes, absolutely brilliant. Please look at them, please review them, and then put them into some kind of plan. Now, planning in a poster creation is not as difficult as planning for something like an essay or whatever, because we can use physical space to help us plan. Now, I've got a small notepad here next to me, and I'm going to use this as my example. In my examples, I'm just going to go for portrait. So you can go portrait or landscape, but it's your typical dimensions of like A4, blown up by the size of the poster. So I'm going to go portrait, like I said. In the planning, I might look at the learning outcomes and realize maybe there's 4 or something like that. Well, the first one probably says something about context, history, development, something like that. So let's use memory as our example, because I mentioned that earlier. If I put a title which says memory, working memory, memory models, whatever, and then sentence number 1 on my poster, or statement number 1, I guess, says memory is defined as, well, I've probably already neglected a learning outcome there. So typically, one learning outcome will be about something like context, history, whatever. So on my poster, I'm going to put the title up top somewhere, and then straight after it, I'm going to put some kind of intro. I'm just going to call this LO1, as in learning outcome number 1. Again, looking at the learning outcomes, we probably have some things in the middle to do with describing something or explaining something. Maybe if you're at higher level, sort of level 5, level 6, or postgraduate level 7 here in the UK or above, you will be asked to evaluate things. So that's going to determine that entire middle section of your poster. So that's going to be the kind of middle section of your poster. And I've just put learning outcomes 2 and 3 there just in case. But again, do think, where am I going to answer these questions? Why am I doing this? And then finally, there's probably something in the latter stages of the learning outcomes to do with conclusions, maybe recommendations, maybe future directions, these types of things. You have to plan for those things as well. And it feels natural to have those near the latter end of your poster as well. So I would probably just call those like learning outcome 4 or something, and I'd have it near the end of the poster. Now, I know what you're thinking. That was too simple, and this is just a rough sketch of my first ever plan. But there are other design elements to consider. I just need to first and foremost have you guys realize that learning outcomes, or the reason why, can start your plan. It can get the ball rolling.